All right, folks, welcome in to Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends over at BetOnline. I am your host, Ryan Blackburn at NBA Blackburn on Twitter, part of the Mile High Sports Podcast Network, and I'm excited to hop in here and talk some Denver Nuggets on this Wednesday night. We're going to do a mailbag. I asked for some questions yesterday on the old Twitter, also re-asked there on Twitter just before going live here, and wanted to get some interesting vibe checks for just what people were feeling, what people were wondering, and how things were going. Should be good, as the Nuggets are now a couple days away, even less than that, probably 36 hours away from playing their first basketball game of the calendar, or of the 2024-25 season. Now, it's abroad, it's in Abu Dhabi. I'm not sure how much that matters versus some of the other things, but I am excited to at least get to see the Nuggets again. It'll be fun. Everybody should have some good vibes. Hopefully, we will just have to wait and see on that front. But I am excited to be able to get into it all with you. Really quickly, this broadcast is brought to you by our good folks over at BetOnline, the number one source for everything football and the world's most trusted betting platform. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Do you think you know your stuff? Get in on the $200,000 MegaContest and pick 5 games against the spread every single week for your chance of weekly prizes and a share of the $200K. When the game's over, head on over to their online casino to get in on some blackjack, poker, and then unwind with some slots. Head on over to their website today to get in on the action. BetOnline, the game starts here. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Make sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. That would really, really be awesome, as we are very close to 10,000 subscribers on the Mile High Sports YouTube page. Had some great stuff come out for CU and for the Broncos and things like that. So would love to see the page get pushed up over 10K by the time the season starts. It'll just be a nice little affirmation of the process that we're going through over here at Mile High Sports. Would really appreciate that. All right, before we get into the mailbag, I wanted to preview things a little bit briefly, just what to expect in Abu Dhabi, just kind of get that out of the way. The next podcast I do will be with the great Matt Brooks over at the Denver Nuggets. We're going to recap the game, the first game on Friday, and should have some other general questions that you can ask Matt as well. So should be a lot of fun. Cedric's in here. He's been vibing out. He says, thought you should know I'm getting a Westbrook authentic jersey too. Very sick. Very sick. That'll be a good look. Seems like Westbrook's really acquitting himself well with Nuggets fans. I think for a long time, Russell Westbrook was a villain for Nuggets fans, just with how good he was, how he played for the Thunder, just the shenanigans with Rocky, things like that. He didn't take any mess. And I do think that rubs some people the wrong way. But now it seems like he's coming around, and Nuggets fans are coming around to him. So pretty cool to see that go full circle. But before we get into everything on the mailbag, like I said, let's preview Abu Dhabi. Let's preview what's going on here. The Nuggets landed, I think, yesterday on Tuesday morning, but for them, it was probably Tuesday afternoon or evening. And they had a practice today. They got to ride around on some camels. They did some dancing and some partying. That's shown up on social media all across the way. And it seems like they're having fun. They're going to have some other events that they do. They did an NBA Cares event as well, a camp out in Abu Dhabi. So they're making the most of their time for sure. Probably very busy people. So this game and this experience, it should not entirely be about, hey, it just should not entirely be about how good you look as a basketball team. That's never how it's supposed to be in these situations. You should always, you're putting forth the NBA first, not the Nuggets first in this situation. It's one of the reasons why they're going, is to continue to showcase the product. You've got a whole bunch of things that go along with it. So I wouldn't be surprised if things don't look perfect. And Nuggets fans should not feel like things have to look perfect immediately, especially with a couple new faces, a new entry into the starting lineup for sure. I think that if I'm Denver, I just want to see progress. I want to see things that look like they are trending in the correct direction, not necessarily having to see Christian Braun shoot 4 for 4 from three, but it would be nice if he hit some of the open shots and looked pretty comfortable. I want to see him moving well within that starting lineup because I think that he's going to start. I think that the Nuggets are going to play all of their starters, and I'm looking forward to seeing what that looks like for the team. Um, but Christian Braun's going to get an opportunity, and Julian Strawther will get his opportunity as well. It's very possible that they decide, hey, we're going to go with Christian Braun in the first game and Julian Strawther in the second game at that starting shooting guard spot. It's very possible they change things up entirely and they don't play Jokic in one of the games, or they don't play Murray in one of the games, or let's say they want to get things pretty weird entirely and then sit 3 or 4 starters and try to get a different look at some guys. I do think that they're going to have to play the starters at some point, though. So what that looks like and how that feels will be, I think, an important piece of this. But with Christian Braun, I want to see him moving well. I want to see him comfortable in his own skin. I want to see him make an impact on the defensive end. And you want to see what it looks like when he is spacing the floor for different actions that involve Murray and Jokic and Porter and Gordon and guys like that. Michael Malone made sure to comment on how the starting lineup should be all about who makes the most of that lineup, not necessarily who makes the most of like their own individual talents and things like that. So that should favor Braun, I have to imagine, but until we see it in practice, we just don't know. Next, in some of these, like I wrote an article on Mile High Sports today that covers some of this too. A lot of what I just mentioned, I wrote on Mile High Sports, so make sure to go check that out. The next one's on Russell Westbrook. I have some reports from early on in practice that Russell Westbrook was pushing the pace, pushing the tempo very, very quickly, doing a whole heck of a lot to try to get up and down the floor, and sometimes kind of outrunning some of the front court guys. The Vlatko Chanchars of the world, the Dario Sarics of the world, the DeAndre Jordans of the world. And especially without Peyton Watson out there, I'm not surprised that that's happening because they're like the Nuggets' second unit outside of Russ and Peyton really isn't really meant to be a running group. It's meant to be more of a slower, methodical group that Russ was supposed to kind of speed up a little bit. My question is, can Russ find that happy medium of pushing the pace, pushing the tempo, but not necessarily going too hard and outrunning his help? That's kind of a concept in football where like this is my own origin showing, where if you are a running back and you're trying to set up blocking down the field, you got to wait for your blockers. You can't necessarily outrun your own blockers because then the defense will catch up to you or they'll get the angle. For the basketball sake of things, that's like if you're going 1-on-3 in a fast break. If you had slowed it down, it would be kind of a 3-on-3 kind of semi-fast break, but you would still be in an advantage situation rather than trying to go 1-on-3 where that could be difficult. So I wonder what Russ ultimately looks like for this group and whether he will be able to run effectively with this group. Michael Porter, I want to see what the additional size and physicality looks like to his game. Like, is he still going to be the exact same player? Or is he going to have his game change a little bit based off of the added 15 pounds of muscle or so? Because I think that he could actually get downhill. I think he could actually get to the rim a little bit more. I put this stat in my article, and it's actually a tremendous stat. I'm surprised that nobody brought it up to me. Michael Porter, let me just make sure that I'm pulling it up here correctly. Of the 1,107 seasons of players to play 2,500 minutes in the last 25 years, so basically since the turn of the century, Michael Porter ranks 1,086th in free throw attempts per 100 possessions. He averages 2.1 free throw attempts per 100. That is in the second percentile. And that is like Michael Porter, who is a good scorer, who's like has a scoring mentality. He wants to score. Unfortunately, he doesn't use the free throws as effectively as he probably could. Part of that is because he's trying to avoid contact, and I have to imagine that was because of his back. I wonder if there is a way for him to draw more contact now that he has some added weight and to be able to throw that around a little bit, get to the free throw line, and take advantage of the fact that he's an 80% plus free throw shooter. The Nuggets need that desperately. They need somebody who can help them from a free throw perspective. If Mike could do that and actually add that to his game, it would improve his points per game. It would improve Denver's overall offense, and it would improve his chances of becoming an all-star if he wanted to be that. So I think that there's no real negative to that unless he can't handle the physicality that well. But we won't know until we see. Couple more things. I hope that Jamal Murray shoots the ball well. Like after the playoffs that he had and the Olympic run that he had, he looked very quick, very agile, and just jittery in the scrimmage that we got to watch. We watched for about 8 to 10 minutes, so I'm not going to sit here and make sweeping generalizations on how he looks. I want to see how he looks in a game environment. I want to see what he looks like against some of the best perimeter defense in the NBA. He'll likely face Derek White or Drew Holiday, not Justin Holiday, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, any of the other guards that sort of mix and match in there. Like he's going to get opportunities to go at some really, really talented defenders. And if he can come away with that, and be efficient with it, that would be really nice. If he shoots 1 of 9 and just doesn't really look good for a half, and then they decide to sit him the rest of the time, it's not going to feel that good. So you just hope that he gets off to a good start, looks like he's comfortable, and can really set the tone for the season as opposed to sort of reacting to how things go. And then finally, I hope that the offense doesn't look impossible for the bench unit. Peyton Watson's not going to be out there. Not sure how much of a positive player he is on the offensive end anyway. But just with Russell Westbrook out there, with Julian Strawther out there, you're going to have some guys like with Dario Saric, and maybe DeAndre Jordan plays the 5 next to Dario Saric at the 4. Hunter Tyson's probably going to get some run. Denver's probably going to run an all bench unit out there, and it might not look good. So we're going to have to see what it looks like. And I just hope that the offense doesn't look like they're in a slog the entire time. If they could find some ways to create some open and easy shots, then that would benefit everybody. It would benefit the Nuggets starters especially. So I am hopeful that the baseline starts pretty high. That's going to involve Russ. It's going to involve Strawther. It's going to involve Dario Saric. Those 3 specifically. So hopefully they can hit the ground running, so to speak. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we are going to chat mailbag. We're going to talk all the Nuggets mailbag questions that you guys sent in. You sent it a lot. You sent in some good ones. We're going to go through them here on Mile High Sports. All right, we're back. Pickaxe and Roll. Ryan Blackburn here. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Would really appreciate it. All right, let's get into the mailbag. Really appreciate everybody for sending questions in. Thank you for thinking of me, and thank you for responding when I sent out the bat signal for all these questions. Cedric, I'm going to start with yours because you've been so good to the chat and so good to the channel. Cedric asked earlier, if ESPN projects the Nuggets not a top 3 seed, will Denver be even more motivated to be that, or just win the championship as a top 5 seed? It's a good question. It's one of those where you just kind of have to understand the ethos of the team. It's going to be circumstantial. I'll say I'm not going to sit here and say that I feel super strongly about whether they're going to be a 3 seed, 4 seed, 5 seed, or could they be a top 2? I think they'll probably be in the playoff picture. Like they're going to be top 6, almost guaranteed. It sort of depends on who else is really good, how things really evolve from that, and whether Denver is going to feel like they need to be at that top level. That kind of comes down to Joker and Jamal. If Jamal is healthy for this entire time and he's just like he plays 72 games, 74 games because Denver built in some rest for him, you got to feel pretty good about Denver's regular season. I think Christian Brown's going to step right in and be pretty solid on that in that starting shooting guard spot. And then if everybody else is reasonably healthy, I think 52 is probably the floor for what the team will actually look like. Now what the ceiling is, I don't know, and that involves really good health. So I think it'll probably be pretty good. And I think that ESPN's obviously wrong for this. Like Kevin Pelton does these rankings. And one thing I do want to mention about these rankings, the win projection is always decreased because that's just how Kevin is. Like he doesn't actually accurately project the scope of the win projections. So don't think about the 47 wins that he associated that with that. Just think about it from the that he has the Nuggets ranked fifth in the West. And that to me, I think is a little bit more emblematic of kind of the feelings on Denver. The other thing is that Minnesota was at like seventh, and that was even before the Karl Anthony Towns trade. So I wonder what the projections look like after that for a team like Minnesota. Jonathan Jingle Jangle asks, how much truth is there to Westbrook playing out of position the last few years / not playing to his strengths, pushing the pace, running the unit, etc.? This is always such a difficult question to answer because players are going to feel some kind of way about things. Fans of that team will feel like the players betrayed them in a lot of ways. The coaching staff will have their own opinions on things, and other players on that team will feel some kind of way. I think with the Clippers, it was clearly true. The Clippers situation was a lot different than the situation with the Lakers, where he had a lot of opportunities. It just wasn't on a team that was well constructed. It was on a team that didn't have any 3-and-D wings anymore after they traded all of those guys for Russell Westbrook. But with the Clippers, they added James Harden in the early part of last season. Before that, Russell Westbrook was playing reasonably well, did some good things, and then they immediately decided, we're going to add James Harden to a team that already has Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, and Russell Westbrook. And for whatever reason, they decided to play a lot of Russ's minutes with Harden. And I wasn't really sure why. I know that Russ isn't like the best player, that like the one that he was at his peak. Like there are some weaknesses in his game that he now has and like slightly less athleticism, things like that. But like you just don't play him with somebody who's that heliocentric. And LeBron is kind of the same way, where it's really hard for a guy like Russell Westbrook to be the right fit around LeBron James when he wants to be the point guard a lot of the time. And then he's also not a great floor spacer when he's out there. So it's ambiguous, man. I don't necessarily think that anybody is right in this situation. Russell Westbrook's going to feel some kind of way about it, but I also think that he has a point in that the Clippers didn't construct their roster the way that you're supposed to for a guy of his strengths. Denver's a little bit different. They don't have as much spacing, but they don't have a lot of ball dominant players. So Russell Westbrook will get plenty of opportunity to handle the basketball, to be a point guard, and that I think is what he wants. NBA Chicken asks, fun question. What's your favorite lineup just for vibes, no analytics? I didn't even think about this beforehand because I wanted to just kind of flesh it out live on the show. Vibes, no analytics. I think the best vibe is going to have Jokic out there, if I'm being honest. And I would want to put him with spacing. Like, I'm not even thinking about analytics from the perspective of, Aaron Gordon is probably the better fit with him objectively at the 4. But I think that Michael Porter is the guy that I want to see at the 4. I want to see what it looks like when he is 235 pounds, how it affects the team with a stretch 4. I want to see Jamal Murray out there. I want to see Julian Strawther out there, and I want to see Christian Braun out there. I think that gives you the right blend of wing spacing and defense. You get a stretch four, and you get the Jokic Murray pick and roll. So basically, you've got the starters, but you replace Aaron Gordon with Julian Strawther, and you play it a little bit smaller. You get a little bit more threes up. I know that that's probably kind of analytic focused, that more so than vibes, but that's just a group that I think that group could win Denver a title when, hypothetically, if Aaron's jumper goes in a playoff series, or they don't feel like necessarily there's a guy for him to match up with defensively, and he's just out there trying his best, but like maybe it's not the best matchup for him. If the same goes for Julian Strawther, you want that spacing out there. But the vibes have to be right. The vibes have to be good. And if Julian Strawther is a guy who hits 5 threes in a playoff game and wins you a playoff series or a championship, that's what I'm thinking about with this. And NBA Chicken asked a second question, nerd question this time. The Nuggets are $1.6 million under the second apron. With AG's extension coming up next summer, do you see the Nuggets making any drastic moves to duck the second apron a second time? This is a fascinating one because Denver doesn't really have that many moves to make. If they really want Aaron Gordon and they really can't pay the second apron, they're going to have to trade Michael Porter. That's just the long and short of it. Everybody else outside of Zeke Naji is on an affordable rookie contract effectively, or a minimum contract. And maybe they could create some stuff by moving Dario Saric, unless he decides he wants to opt out and then you get out of that contract for free. Maybe there is some stuff that they could do with Murray. But I just kind of I don't see them trading Murray now that he is signed for a long-term deal. And nor do I think that they want to. Because like it or not, these teams are constructed by having your first and second best player and then building around that. Jokic and Murray is their formula. That is what they're going with. And I just don't see how they can change that now unless they trade Murray for a like-minded player, a style player. So the only thing I could think of is getting out from under Zeke Naji's contract, but that's going to have to get creative. And could you see them stretch him? Could you see them stretch his contract so that he hypothetically makes less money, but over a longer period of time? The rules on waiving and stretching a player would be double the years that they have left and then add 1 year on top of that. So if they stretched Zeke Naji, then it would actually look like you're paying him basically $3.5 million, I think, over the course of 7 seasons. And that is a lot of money. That's a significant amount of money to pay. So you better feel like it's the right call. And I don't know if that is enough of a helpful thing for them to really justify it, but we'll just have to see. Okay. Taped Up Sports. Then we'll hit a break after this. Aaron Gordon obviously needs to be kept. What sacrifices do the Nuggets have to make given the expected figure? I think they've just got to be willing to pay the second apron. If I'm being honest, this is similar question to the last one. If they can't pay the second apron, then I don't know, man. They're probably not built to be a contender, if I'm being honest. This is sort of the most important thing that a championship team needs to have, is they need to be willing and able to pay the money that is there when they have to. And to me, this just looks strikingly like Denver doesn't want to pay the second apron. So if they are willing to pay Aaron what he wants to get paid, which, he's eligible for basically a 4-year, $145 million deal. If he's eligible for that, that is not that far off from what you'd expect a guy like him to want to get paid. Is it perfect? No, because Aaron's going into his 11th season. And I think the Nuggets are rightly trying to cut some corners there. And make things a little cheaper for them in his year 12, 13, 14, and 15th season, where a guy like him is likely going to regress and could regress pretty fast. I've done this data work before. So I think that Aaron will probably have to make a sacrifice if he wants to stay with the Nuggets for a long-term deal. And maybe they could try to do a descending contract where they pay him the max up front and then pay him less going forward. And that might make the contract a little bit more bearable. Or they just pay him 4 years, $35 million per year flat. And that would be, I think, a pretty reasonable thing with you. If you think the cap is going up, then that's a reasonable contract for somebody that you think is going to be a starter for your team for at least the next 2 seasons, if not more. So I don't know. It's tough. Like, Denver probably has to make some sacrifices, but as I've laid out, if they want to keep Murray, if they want to keep Porter, if they want to keep Jokic, there's just only so much that they could do. Okay, let's take a final break. When we come back, we are going to go into more of these questions. I'll go faster for sure. We'll have a good time with it. We will be right back on Mile High Sports. All right, we're back. Final segment. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. Appreciate all the love and support on the podcast. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Would really, really appreciate it. All right. Miguel asks in the comments here, does Peyton get any minutes at shooting guard at all this season? So this is a fascinating one because I think that if he had a training camp, the answer is probably yes. I know that the team might feel like they know what they have with him. Michael Malone might feel like he knows what he's going to do with Peyton Watson. And then you get out there and you see a turnover, and then you feel like, okay, can I really trust this guy to handle the ball? I think if you have a training camp to work through and flesh out those issues, then sure. The problem that the Nuggets are running into is they don't have that with Peyton Watson. This is important skill development, important chemistry time for them in this training camp period. So I'm a little bit worried that this season is going to get off to a little bit of a slow start. If you remember last year, Christian Braun missed the entire preseason with an injury. He played all 82 games. It wasn't an issue, but he did start the season in the first 40 or 50 games and was not great. Like, people forget that. He was not tremendous in those first 40 to 50 games. It was an adjustment period because he didn't get that preseason. And Peyton Watson's in exactly the same position now. So I hope he can get back there. I hope the Nuggets learn from that situation and they continue to try to do skill development with Peyton over the course of the year. Shooting guard minutes would be helpful. I think that he could play that. Kind of has to play it with all of the starters out there at the same time. There's not a ton of minutes where I think it actually makes sense for him to play shooting guard unless he's out there with Porter, Gordon, Jokic. Maybe it's Porter, Gordon, Saric. Maybe it's Porter, Hunter Tyson, Saric, Porter, Hunter Tyson, Jokic, something like that. Either way, there's not a lot of configurations that Denver has where he's going to be able to play the two unless they decide to put him with the starters. Maybe it's a game-by-game basis where Denver feels like they could get away with that matchup. Okay, back to the questions at hand. Rich Kurtzman, shout out Rich, Mile High Sports guy. He asks, how concerning are the T-Wolves and how they're constructed in terms of being Nuggets beaters? I answered this a little bit in the last podcast. I think that they are worse. I think that the T-Wolves are less equipped to beat the Denver Nuggets than they were previously because Karl-Anthony Towns was a good matchup against Nikola Jokic and Aaron Gordon and guys like that. He figured some things out in that 2023 the championship run for Denver. He figured some things out in that first round and then looked really good against Denver in this last season. So not a surprise, but I do think that he will be somebody that Denver's happy to see out of the West. And I think that they could just match up with Julius Randle. They could figure that out. Dante DiVincenzo, that will be an interesting challenge, but he is just somebody that you can't leave. And then he's somebody that you have to attack on the defense, on the other end, like when you're on offense. So We'll see what it looks like, but I think that they are worse. And I guess to answer the question, I'm less concerned than I was before. I thought before this trade, I thought that the Nuggets were like a 50-50 still against the T-Wolves. Now I think it's more 55-45 Nuggets, maybe 60-40 Nuggets. It's still going to be a hell of a series, like a really, really tough series. Patrick Rasmussen, shout out. He asks, can you talk about bench lineups that make sense for both Vlatko and Zeke to receive short stints in the time that Michael Porter Jr. is not playing with the bench? I remember putting this question in here. He was implying that Michael Porter's the main stagger with that second unit. So if he is the main stagger, then in the minutes when he's not out there, very brief amounts of time, I could see Vlatko being the 4 in lineups when Aaron Gordon is not out there and Jokic is, where it's not even really a bench lineup because it's Jokic out there. I've done this configuration before where both Mike and Aaron Gordon go to the bench. Maybe Mike staggers and then Aaron comes back in a little bit later. But I do think that there is something to trying to get Vlatko to play with Jokic, trying to get him out there, space the floor, take advantage of the chemistry, do everything that you need to do with him. With Zeke, I honestly think that Zeke and Dario Saric could be solid. Like, as long as Zeke is shooting and if he hits his threes, then I don't see any reason why Zeke and Dario can't play together at all. Now, if you add Russ into that equation, if you add Peyton Watson into that equation, if Julian Strawther's not spacing the floor that well, then you get a little dicey for sure. But if it's like Jamal Murray staggering with the second unit, can't you do Zeke and Dario and feel reasonably good about it? I think you probably could. Let's say it's a Russ, Jamal, Julian, Zeke, Dario lineup where Zeke's kind of your do-it-all, everything defensive guy who switches onto everybody, tries to play very hard, runs the floor a little bit. I could see that working. I could see that being surprisingly good. And then Dario hitting him with high-low passes where Dario's at the high post. Braxton Reynolds asks, what are the optimal lineup combinations for Russ, do you think? Which players must he share the court with and which players should he not play with? I've talked about this before. I think Julian Strawther is a guy that he really needs to focus in on. And I honestly think Dario Saric should be pretty good for him too. Having guys that can space the floor, having guys that he can constantly kick out to, players that can create their own shot a little bit, I think that that's what Julian's going to continue to add to his game. And if he gets an open three, he's going to take it. And that's what Russ needs. He needs somebody that has a quick trigger where he could give the ball up and they can take a shot and make it immediately. Dario will be a good pick and pop option where he doesn't crowd the paint for Russ when they're running pick and pop, when they're running pick and roll. He'll be a guy who can kind of drop it off to the dump off option kind of in that pocket area. And I think that he could shoot the floater a little bit. He could do some other things. But most importantly, I think having Michael Porter out there would be great for Russ. He's one of those guys that, because Russ likes to hunt assists for other people. He loves to hunt in transition. He loves to get out there. But especially in the half court, he does love to drive. He loves to try to get into the paint and then kick out. I think that Michael Porter would be great with that. The theoretical lineup that I'd be looking for if I was Denver: Russ, Julian Strawther, Peyton Watson, Michael Porter, Dario Saric. And the Peyton's the other guy. Theoretically, not a great fit, but I think personally, because those guys both went to UCLA, they have a relationship already. Peyton was on Russell Westbrook's AAU team growing up. That relationship is going to be good. Guys that he probably shouldn't play with, I don't think that Russ and AG are going to be a good fit. I don't think that Russ and DeAndre Jordan are going to be a good fit. There might be some to it because they're really good friends, but it's something that if Russ, Dario, and DeAndre Jordan are out there, it gets a little bit crowded and cramped. And then Christian Brown's the other one. You want to see Christian attack and transition, and maybe he could be a good running mate for Russell Westbrook at times. But I do think that the spacing is still something I'm thinking about. You also need somebody that you want to, like, if the going gets tough, they can also create their shot. I don't think that Christian's that guy as much as Julian could be. Let's check a look here. David Talk Sports asks, can Trey Alexander make the rotation? Interesting question. I don't think so, at least not at the outset. But there is this thing that I've been thinking about with what happens if Jamal goes down? What happens if Russell Westbrook goes down? What does the team do? What do they think about? Well, in those situations, what a standard team would do was they just elevate their third point guard. They would play, like, let's say it's Jamal that goes down. Russell Westbrook starts. Jalen Pickett would be your third point guard, and he would be the second unit guy. And then everything would be basically the same. Then we watched some of the lineups from the scrimmage, and it got me thinking. Denver has the capability this year to go without a point guard in some lineups. And that lineup that we watched was Christian Braun, Julian Strawther, Aaron Gordon, Vlatko Cancar, Nikola Jokic. You switch Vlatko and Aaron. But those two young wings that Denver had, the two guys that are playing shooting guard, they basically just said, hey, Joker, you run point. You run the point, and we'll see what happens with it. So I don't think that Denver will go to a player like Trey Alexander. Hypothetically, if they decide they need a point guard in some of those looks, or the actual non-point guard look just doesn't really work, I think you got to give it an opportunity. Maybe you give Jalen Pickett an opportunity. I know that he's, like, some people think he's in the doghouse. I don't think that that's far off. If Michael Malone believes in Trey Alexander and the Nuggets need a point guard and they need somebody who can actually get the ball out there and then hit some shots or run some offense, then the options are few and far between. So maybe it is Trey Alexander that gets a shot. I've got plenty more questions here, but I've only got time for a couple more. I wanted to keep this to 40 minutes. Philip DMV, actually, you know what? I did ask I'd answered the AG extension question already, so sorry. Capologist asked, what's your most intriguing lineup? I'm personally interested to see what the lineup of Murray, Westbrook, Chris Paul, I was about to say, Christian Braun, Michael Porter, and Jokic does. So that's Murray, Russ, CB, Michael Porter, and Jokic. It'll be interesting. There's definitely, like, any lineup that has all three of Denver's top scorers, and Murray, Porter, and Jokic, it's going to be hard to screw that up. And I think that this lineup would be just fine. It would be very aggressive. It would be downhill. There would be some spacing with Mike at the 4. Maybe you could run Russell Westbrook into the short corner at sometimes, which he probably doesn't want to do, but he might have to for this team at times. But there could be some stuff that works there. I would say that the most intriguing lineup was the one I talked about earlier, which has Peyton Watson in there next to... Actually, no, it wasn't Peyton. It was Murray, Braun, Strawther, Porter, Jokic. That was the one that I had. But I could also see it being Murray, Strawther, Watson, Porter, Jokic, and then getting a little bit more size. Melody is Dead asks, AG at the 5 and Russ could work? It probably could. Like, I don't see any reason why it couldn't work. It's one of those lineups that you're going to need some spacing around it. You're going to need some guys that shoot. One of the things that we remember from this last year, when Denver had some of those games where Jokic was either out or he got ejected from. I remember the Detroit game specifically where they were like, hey, Aaron, you're going to run the 5. And then KCP was big in that game. Reggie Jackson was big in that game. The guys that they could shoot from 3, they could have some spacing. Michael Porter's going to be big for that as well. So I think you just need those wings that are going to be capable shooters around a group that has Russ and AG. Now, Jamal could be out there too and be just fine. Build a lineup that has Jamal, Michael Porter, and Julian Strawther, and you feel pretty good about AG and Russ out there as well. So there's ways that they can make it work. Also, you said so AG, Saric, MPJ, P-Watt, Russ. A little bit big, despite the fact that it doesn't have a true center. I think Saric is kind of like a 4.5. Um, I could see it work. I could see it being pretty solid. Not a lot of shooting there with P-Watt and AG and Russ. That's kind of a tough sell, but I think it's at least possible. JK Walrus asks, any word on Yoke's wrist? Has that just gone to sleep till the next time he's wrapped? That's exactly it. He will get sore. He will get it wrapped. He'll get it iced or heat pad, and he'll probably get both if I'm being honest. And then we'll ask about it, and then he'll say, I'm fine. I'm going to play. And that's what will happen. That's what I've come to expect. I think he's going to get surgery on it after his career. I don't think that he wants to stop playing basketball at any point. And so if he's like willing to wait, if the Nuggets are willing for him to wait, then I think this is probably like it's not a non-story, but it's something that I don't really consciously think about because I have a strong suspicion that he will wait for as long as possible. All right, let's get one more question before we get out of here. How about that? Let's go negative. Joker asks, I really hope Braun steps up this season, but what if he doesn't? Will we then give Strawther a chance or will we look for options in the trade market? It's a great question and one where Denver doesn't necessarily have all the time in the world in order to wait and see. I don't see much of a scenario where Braun just doesn't work. Like maybe he gets the yips, maybe he shoots 30% from three, and then the defense isn't where it needs to be, and then the Nuggets are just struggling. And under that scenario, you probably bench him first, and you probably try to figure it out with some other guys. Maybe it's Strawther, maybe it's Peyton Watson, maybe it's Russell Westbrook. Who knows? But I do think that they would give other guys a chance before like trading, before figuring that out. But Calvin Booth did say at Media Day that he's at least monitoring the shooting. And if that's the case, Denver could probably use a shooting guard if one of their shooters doesn't really work out. So that's something that I'd be monitoring too. Denver doesn't have a ton of flexibility, obviously, with their cap space, but they do have Zeke Najee's contract. They could pair it with somebody else. Let's say it was Christian Braun, and then add in the 2031 first round pick or something like that. And once you get to that point, you could probably go pretty strong with some of the guys that you could potentially get. Players like Jordan Clarkson stand out, but there's a lot of other names that I think could be had for that particular cost. You just have to be willing to wait for the right opportunity to present itself. And if it doesn't, maybe you don't trade for somebody. But Calvin's going to be hard-pressed to trade one of the guys that he has built around. Peyton Watson, Christian Braun, Julian Strawther. I find it very difficult to think any of those three guys will not be on the team. I think that everybody wants to see those guys work out, Calvin Booth most of all, and he's going to be committed to that. So last case scenario will be a trade market opportunity. I think they'd probably look at the buyout market sooner than they would look at the trade market, especially if it involved trading any of those guys. Okay. Folks, thank you for tuning in on this Wednesday night episode. That is going to do it for this episode of Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends over at BetOnline. Thank you so much. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button on the way out. I'm going to be chatting with Matt Brooks, as I mentioned earlier. We're going to be chatting after the Nuggets game on Friday. That is an early game, I think at 12, I want to say. I could be wrong about that, but we will chat after that. DNVR will go live. Locked on Nuggets will go live at some point, and we will just see kind of where Pickaxe and Roll fits in. Thank you so much, everybody. Really appreciate it. We'll talk to you guys very soon.